everybody, it's Sarah and I am here with my promised TBR video. A few videos back I did a full or mostly full bookshelf tour of all the shelves that I now have, now that I'm in a new flat, and I kind of just very quickly went over my TBR books because I said I would do a TBR video. So I am going to do a video telling you all about my physical TBR and how we're looking at the end of 2023 and going forward into 2024. And so that similarly to my series, finished unfinished series videos, we can every year look at what changed on my TBR. Did I manage to actually read a lot of the books? Do some books just keep on staying on this TBR, and so on. So yeah, let's get into it. I showed you my TBR card already in my bookshelf tour, so I will not go into it very much right now. These books up here, by the way, they are not TBR books. The books that I have up here are always the books that I have read this month, so they stay up here until I do my monthly wrap-ups. Or some of them might stay up here longer because if I want to film a dedicated review for a book, then that book will stay up here until I film that review. Otherwise, I just forget that that was my intention. So yeah, let's just get into it, I guess. I will not tell you too much about each book. I need to count actually how many books there are on here, but it's I think over 40 books, so I won't tell you too much about each book. This TBR card also does not include my non-fiction TBR, which is way bigger than the books that I have on here. And I will just very quickly tell you the genre of each book and give you a rough estimate of since when these books are on my TBR, although there aren't any books that have been on my TBR longer than 2021, because in 2021 I finished my TBR 0, which meant I had no more books on my TBR except books that I bought that year. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so funny thing, I have right now counted all the books that I have right here, and I only come to 38. On my full reading spreadsheet, so on the spreadsheet, oh, I remember why there's some that I'm missing. On my full reading spreadsheet, there's 42 books currently. And then on my 2023 reading spreadsheet, there's 44 books. So somewhere there's misalignment. I do have 40 books here right now. 2 more I need to get from my other shelf. And then there's one that I won't include because I technically already unhauled it. I just haven't read it yet to unhaul it. So yeah, we're working with 40 books right now, plus 2 books that I'm currently reading that I won't be mentioning because I will finish them in the next few days. So let's actually start with the 2 books that I forgot about because I don't have them on my TBR card right here. I already have them in their fixed place on my shelves, which are 2 classics. They are, I forgot what this edition is called, but they are these classics right here. The first of the 2 I have is The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. And then the second one I have is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I am very excited to get to these, especially Madame Bovary, because, I don't know, I think it's a very, very interesting book, and also it's a tragedy, so yeah, I really need to get to this. Then continuing on, let's actually move away from my TBR card and move towards the books back here, which are my most immediate TBR. First I have Angels Before Man by Rafael Nicolas, because I think he's Mexican, but I can't do a Spanish accent, so butchered that. But Angels Before Man is a Bible, Genesis retelling, kind of Paradise Lost. It's a Bible retelling and it's queer and it's about Lucifer and Michael, I believe, so the archangels, or archangels, I don't know how you say it in English. But yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it. Also, I believe at least one of the two angels is trans as well, so just a lot of queer goodness. We love queering religious trauma. It's so tasty. Then I have Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. This is the fourth and last book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. I have already started it. I am like 60-70 pages into it, 5 chapters into it. I need to finish this series, but it's so big. It's so big, and that keeps me from picking it up because, I don't know, it's just uncomfortable to read, you know, physically uncomfortable. And then I have another book that I have started and just set aside currently because I'm kind of annoyed with the author for reasons, and that is Maiden Mother Crone by Joanne Harris. This is an omnibus of her 3 stories that are inspired by the child ballads. So The Blue Salt Road, A Pocketful of Crows, as well as Orphea, and then also additionally 3 new short stories in the Honeycomb world. I have already read A Pocketful of Crows and Orphea, however I am like rereading the entire omnibus. I am halfway through the first story, which is A Pocketful of Crows, and I will probably continue on with this at some point in the new year. And we need to get a little bit quicker, otherwise this video will be really fucking long. So let's continue on and let's start here. Here I have mostly just my standard size paperbacks. I do not really have my TBR cards sorted any specific way aside from how the books fit on here. And so I have all the bigger books kind of in the lower section, the standard size paperbacks in this section, and then back here I have the mass markets, and I have it that way because I can fit 2 rows like this in one, you know, level. But I have a book that I only got quite recently, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I got this for Scylla because Scylla has been hyping this book a lot, and I think it's like somewhat like speculative fiction, horror adjacent, and queer, I think. Well, I know it's queer, but I think it's horror adjacent. Then I have Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. This is historical fiction. It's written by a Palestinian author, which was why I got this. And also I want to read this already in January, so this is gonna be one of the first books on my TBR for 2024. I will talk about that more in my 2024 goals list, but I kind of want to start a reading the world type challenge. Won't get through it in 2024 at all, but yeah, and this is one of the first books I want to read for that. A book that has been on my TBR since the year it was published, which I think was 2022. I think I've had it on my TBR since 2022, is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia, or maybe 2021, one of the 2 years. And this is a standalone by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is the last chance that I will give this author because her books tend to be very, like, I don't dislike their books, but they tend to be very, yeah, you know, I'm having a good enough time. So yeah, we'll see how I like The Beautiful Ones. This is, I think, fantasy romance, and it's kind of like Regency era type, although I don't think it's historical fiction fantasy. I think it's actually high fantasy, but very Regency inspired. It's also a standalone, if I haven't said that yet. Then I have The Library of the Unwritten by H.E. Hackworth, which is the first book in a series, and I've heard quite a few good things about this, and it's about heroes, like it's about a library in hell and about a hero escaping from a book and the librarian having to drag this hero down or something. It sounds really fun and really interesting, so yeah. I bought this in 2022, I think. Another 2022 book was Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long. Yeah, Haven't picked it up yet. There's quite a few books from the beginning of 2022 that I haven't picked up yet when I kind of was building my TBR again, because while I did want to do a TBR 0 because there have been so many books on my TBR that like have been on my book, on my TBR for a decade, I do quite like having like a physical TBR between 30 and 50 books, because that means I can just every now and again, if I don't feel like anything specific, just go up to my shelves and pick a book. And so I bought this in that time when I was building my TBR again. It's adult high fantasy. Similarly, also The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, which is the first book in the, I forgot what the series is called. I think maybe it's also called The Bone Season or something. And yeah, also similar deal with this. Also, this was recommended to me, although I've heard a lot of mixed things about this series. Then a book that has been on my shelf for ages. This one has been on my shelf actually since 2021, because I did intend to read through the entire series in 2021, and that is Joe Abercrombie Best Served Cold, which was the first standalone within the First Law world. I bought this directly after I finished the First Law trilogy, and then I didn't pick it up. I finally need to do so in 2024, hopefully. Continuing on, I have Moon Witch Spider King by Marlon James. This is the second book in the Dark Star trilogy, which is this really interesting African mythology inspired high fantasy trilogy. And the first book was Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and I really enjoyed that already. And yeah, it has this really interesting concept because the times overlap, like the timelines within the single books overlap, but you get each book told from a different perspective, and so you have some unreliable narration going on and stuff. And yeah, definitely very excited for this. Continuing on, a book that I had picked up like randomly in, I think also at the end of 2022 or something, because of just it having been a while since I bought a book, and so I got one, was The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is the first book in the Lysanias trilogy. This one, I think there's some really interesting stuff going on with fate and so on, and people being able to tell fate or something. I forgot what it was exactly. The reason why I really want to get to this now is because I think like The Will of the Many, which was hyped a lot this year, I think is also written by James Islington, and I kind of really want to read that, but I don't want to read that without first reading this trilogy and knowing if his writing is even for me. Next, we have Neon Young and the Tenserate series, which is a series of 4 novellas, and this is the bind-up. This is also just queer fiction. It's been on my radar for a while, and when I saw the bind-up for actually really cheap in London this year, I just had to pick it up. So this is one of my more recent additions to my TBR. I got at the beginning of this year because I've been promising Cleo for ages that I would read this, was Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Cole, which is the first book in the I forgot what it's called series. And I did not get to this book this year, but 2024 will be the year when I will read Master of Sorrows. Now let's turn this around and go over the other side. Here I have some retellings or mythology inspired books. First I have Sister Song by Lucy Holland, which is set in, I think, Great Britain or like the British Isles during Roman or just after the Roman rule. And it's about 3 sisters. I believe it's also queer. Lucy Holland has a new book coming out this year, and once again it's a similar thing as with James Islington. If I already have a book by that author on my TBR, I kind of want to read or need to read that book first before I pick up any other books by that author. But yeah, so I'm definitely gonna need to have to get to this. Then we have The Children of Jocasta by Natalie Hines, which is It's not an Oedipus retelling because I think it follows all the children of Jocasta, which is obviously Oedipus and Antigone. And so I just thought that that's a myth, or a myth cycle that you don't see a lot of in retellings, which was why I picked it up. Even though the first book I read by Natalie Hines, which I read back in 2020, I think, which was 1,000 Ships, wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I thought I'd give her a second chance. A book I picked up on a whim because the cover is cool and also the premise sounds really interesting is The Mad Woman's Ball by Victoria Mass. I do not know if this is just historical fiction or speculative historical fiction, but it follows like women from an asylum or living in an asylum. And in this asylum, once a year, there's this ball being held, and it's set in Paris in the late 1800s. And yeah, it just sounds really interesting, and it's quite short, so, you know. Also, I need to diversify my reading again a bit more in terms of genre, so that's why I'm currently also picking up some more literary fiction books again. I think I bought this one in 2023 or 2024, I don't remember. Next, I have a bunch of books that I got within the last 3 years from different used bookstores. First, I have Jenny Wirt's That Way Lies Camelot, which is a short story collection by Jenny Wirtz. I read the Empire trilogy, which was written by her and Raymond E. Feist, and I just picked up a handful of her books, or I picked up this specifically because I wanted to see if her writing was for me. And so yeah, I think this is both fantasy and science fiction short stories, and I picked it up used. Again, I think I paid €2 or something for this, so you know. And this next one I got even though like usually I wanted to read this first before I got this one, but then I had to get to a specific like limit on the used bookstore site that I usually use to get free shipping, and this one was like also €2, so I put this in as well. This is The Curse of the Mistwraiths by Jenny Wirtz. It's the first book in the Wars of Shadow and Light series, which is like her big cycle, which I think was only finished like this year or last year. It's a chunky book, but yeah, hopefully I'll get to it this year. And now I need to change the battery. Also, I'm sorry if in the background you can hear like construction work, because someone's working in my house. So I need to pick up speed a little bit because I have to leave in 15 minutes. Anyway, next one I have is Southern Fire by Juliet E. McKenna, which is book 1 in the Aldabrechen Compass series. This one I also just picked up on a whim at a used bookstore in Amsterdam. And at that time I also picked up 2 more books on a whim in Amsterdam, and those were The Company of Glass and The Riddled Knight by Valerie Leith, which are the first 2 books in the Evergreen series. And these 3 books, so these 2 and this one, are currently the books that have been on my TBR for the longest time. Then I have First Rider's Call by Kristen Britton, which is the sequel to Green Rider, which I read last year. I think I picked this up at the beginning of the year because I had intended to buddy read it with a friend. However, we didn't get to it because we are like notoriously bad at actually getting to our buddy reads. Our list is long, our successes are little so far. Although we did buddy read the first book as well. And then I also got The Dark Mirror, which is the first book in the Bride Chronicles by Juliet Marillet. I really want to get more into Juliet Marillet's writing again because I really enjoy her books, and she's usually pretty easy to find on my used book site that I usually use. Actually, I lied. There's one book that has been on my TBR longer than the other 3, and that's because it was gathering dust at my mom's place. But instead of getting rid of it, I decided that I would finally read it, and that is The Serpent Bride by Sarah Douglas, which is the first book in the Dark Glass Mountain series. I don't know what it's about. I remember that I bought it back when I was still in high school. So yeah, it's actually still in almost pristine condition. Although it's quite funny because, I don't know if you can tell this, but the printing doesn't quite line up on this book. So next we're on the lower levels. Here we have mostly my hardcovers as well as some of the bigger paperbacks that I have. First I have Die Farbe der Rache by Cornelia Funke, which is the 4th book in the Inkheart series, which came out this year, and I am so excited for this one. Then we have my most recent addition to my TBR pile, because this is December's Illumicrate book and I got my box yesterday, and that is The Principle of Moments by Esme Chikemi Pearson. This one is science fiction, there's time travel, there's something in there with the British Museum, which, to be honest, excites me because we all know how I am about museums, especially if there might be some, you know, alternate viewpoints on museums in the books. Another Illumicrate book that I haven't gotten to yet is After the Forest by Kel Woods. This is a fairy tale inspired book, inspired by Hansel and Gretel, after the two of them have escaped from the witch and have already grown up, and Hansel has kind of become an alcoholic and Gretel is just trying to keep everything together. We need to turn this around again now. You can't see it, but I do. The next Illumicrate book I will actually read, because this one is the pick for January for my book club, which is of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and which is all about reading adult fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks, is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow, which is a standalone, I think probably like gothic will describe this the best, fantasy novel. I don't know if it's high fantasy or if it's historical fantasy, but it's set in a house and it's creepy and it's gothic, and I am very excited for this one because I've heard a lot of very good things about the writing specifically. And if you want to join us, all the links to my book club are down below, so go and check them out. Another Juliet Mary Lee book I randomly got because I saw that this was available on my used book site was The Color by Juliet Mary Lee, which is the 3rd book in the Shadowfell Chronicles, which is one of her YA series. I do not own the 2nd book yet, so I need to wait to get the 2nd book until I can get this one, but it was available and it was like €3 for a hardcover, so I had to get it. Then I have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, who is, I think, a Filipino writer. This is also a fantasy story that I've heard a lot of great things about and that I'm very excited for, however, that I've not gotten around to picking up yet. I will, like, at the latest, I will read it during Asian American Pacific Islander, AAPI History Month. I think it was Asian American Pacific Islander History Month. So at the latest, that's when I'll get to this. Then a book that I am absolutely appalled that I haven't picked up yet, but I don't know why I haven't yet, is Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, which is of course her, or, oh no, actually I thought it was Rebecca Kuang. No, it's R.F. Kuang, which is of course her literary fiction debut. I need to get to it. No excuses anymore. I will do it in 2024. Then we have some series continuations. First I have Clear North, The House of Odysseus, which is the 2nd book in the Songs of Penelope series, which is a series following Penelope, Odysseus' wife, during the years when Odysseus is on his, let's call them travels, you know. And I really enjoyed Ithaca, which was the 1st book, so obviously I got the 2nd book. I haven't gotten to it yet though. Then I have A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. I got this one because I was scared that I would, like, it was just before a long train travel and I was scared that I would finish my book on that travel, which I then ended up not doing anyway. But yeah, so that's when I got this one. This is obviously the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. I think that's maybe why I'm very hesitant to pick it up, because I'm not as much of a fan of Priory as a lot of other people are. Even though when I first read it, I did give it 4 stars. Next, a book that I'm also very appalled that I haven't read yet is The Queen's Price by Anne Bishop, which is the newest book in the Black Jewel series of the new arc, which had the last 3 books, which was The Queen's Bargain, The Queen's Weapon, and now The Queen's Price. The Black Jewel series obviously is my favorite nostalgia series, my favorite series from my childhood or teen years, I guess. So I really should finally get to this one. And lastly, we have 3 more Illumicrate books that I haven't gotten to yet, 2 of which have been on my shelves for the longest time. They are some of the oldest Illumicrate books that I own and still haven't gotten to yet because they are YA, so I'm hesitant to pick them up. First, I have The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. Yeah, haven't gotten to it, don't know what it's about, to be honest, but yeah, it's so pretty. And also The Whispered Dark, which again is also YA, also haven't gotten to it yet. And lastly, we have The Chesed Heir by Sarah Hashem, which is Middle Eastern, I think, or Egyptian inspired high fantasy. And I also haven't gotten to it yet, but this one has only been the Illumicrate book sometime this summer. I think July it was the book or something along those lines. So, you know, it's not been on my TBR for that long yet. And that was it for my physical TBR for 2023. We'll see each other with this video next year again, and we'll see if I have managed to read any of these books or if I just read the books that I bought in 2024. And so tell me in the comments down below, what is your number of physical TBR books that you like having, that you feel comfortable with? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to the book club I mentioned will be linked down below, so go check those out, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!